Hey guys, Dr. Bodle here, and for a significant number of people, when they try to eat healthier to support their thyroid and gut symptoms, they actually start to feel worse. Seems counterintuitive, but it does happen. In these scenarios, we sometimes need to use more specialized approaches and dietary tools to get the results that we want. So in today's video, we're going to take a closer look at the low FODMAP diet, which is something that I often use clinically. We'll talk about why thyroid issues can lead to gut problems, when it makes sense to utilize a low FODMAP approach, and what a low FODMAP diet actually entails. As I said, my name is Dr. Bodle. I've been in practice for just about 8 years now, and during that time, I've helped thousands of patients improve their Hashimoto's and hypothyroid symptoms by using natural strategies. And if you've been enjoying the content and been learning a lot, please remember to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. That way you're notified when I post videos on Thursday mornings. And with that out of the way, let's get started, shall we? So before we get too far into things today, I wanted to let you know that I'm going to list all of my low FODMAP recommendations down in the description box. So if that's what you're here for, it's available for you. Definitely check it out. But just like with any tool, I think the context is really important and we need to use it in the right situation. So that's what the rest of this video is about. Now, as you probably already know, when we have thyroid problems, it can impair our body's ability to produce energy and have a healthy metabolism. And one part of our body that is particularly demanding in both of those areas is our gut. And changes in thyroid function can very quickly manifest as gut symptoms. This can include things like bloating, reflux, digestive pain and cramping, and changes in bowel movements, either constipation, diarrhea, or a mix of both. The reason that these symptoms occur is because healthy thyroid function allows us to produce adequate levels of stomach acid and other digestive enzymes, while also regulating normal gut motility. Without a healthy gut environment, it can impair things like food digestion and nutrient absorption, and can also contribute to dysbiosis and translocation of gut microbes, meaning different microbes being in locations that they shouldn't normally be in. Any one of these issues can lead to the symptoms that we already mentioned because our gut is all about timing and order. Just like with anything in life, you get things out of order and things start to go wrong. So if hypothyroidism can contribute to changes in motility and these IBS-like symptoms, when does it make sense to employ a low FODMAP diet? Now, when I first start working with a patient, I almost never start them on a low FODMAP diet. And this comes from my desire to progress patients from simple changes to more complex changes as needed. Also, I always want to be able to make minimal adjustments and maximize the outcomes, which is why starting out with a bunch of complex strategies isn't always the best idea. For example, I recently had a patient who had significant levels of bloating. It would get worse for her throughout the day, and by the end of the day, she described it as looking as though she was 6 months pregnant. It was super uncomfortable, and it was impairing a lot of her day-to-day activities. One of her doctors had mentioned before that she could try a low FODMAP diet, but she really didn't know what that meant or how she could get started. When I met with her, I told her that I could understand her doctor's recommendation, and it did make sense. But she also hadn't made any other dietary changes up until that point. So instead of starting out with something more complicated like low FODMAP, we recommended that she go grain and dairy free, and we also removed some of her individual food sensitivities, which included things like tomatoes. For her, making those dietary changes and also including some digestive enzyme support and probiotic therapy was enough to dramatically improve her symptoms. This was because her bloating and dysbiosis was more a result of food reactivity and the associated inflammation. So by being specific about our choices and keeping things simple, we were able to achieve the results that we needed without going to those more extreme changes. However, obviously that's not always the case, and if someone has tried everything, or if we've already installed dietary recommendations and we're not seeing improvements, then that's when we need to start considering some of these other options. As I said at the start of the video, one of the big things I look for is when people start eating healthier, they don't see improvements or they start to feel worse. And the reason for that is because when we switch from a more refined and processed diet to a more whole foods diet, it often greatly increases the amount of fiber and fermentable fibers that we're consuming. These fibers are more difficult for our body to break down and process, and they act as fuel and substrates for the bugs in our gut. When our microbiome isn't healthy and it gets more fuel than it needs, again, because we're not breaking it down, because we have overgrowth of certain cultures, or because those cultures are in the wrong spot, they have a party and go nuts. And the byproduct of them breaking down these fibers is an increase in gas production. Depending on the person and the cultures, there can be a number of different gases that are produced. But this is why persistent bloating is such a common symptom and why we often see changes in bowel movements. Our gut will react differently to different types of gases, which can either speed up our gut motility or slow it down. So low FODMAP makes sense for us if we have persistent bloating, especially bloating that gets worse throughout the day or worse when we eat, and changes in bowel movements. If we've tried other dietary strategies and we've seen only mild or no improvement, and if we feel worse with more whole foods in our diet or high fiber options. So how do we actually get started with a low FODMAP diet? Or essentially, what foods are included? Now, usually when I'm talking about avoiding foods, it's in the context of Hashimoto's and autoimmunity. And we've often discussed how it's not about the amount that is the issue, it's more the immune reactivity and the exposure that the immune system is receiving. This means that even small amounts of a particular food that you're sensitive to can continually trigger our immune system, generating inflammation and perpetuating our symptoms. But when it comes to low FODMAP, it is the amount that matters. And the more substrate that our body can't break down and process, the more symptomatic we tend to be. This is one of the reasons why it can be a confusing approach. And you'll often see low FODMAP lists include 3 tiers: a top tier, which is okay for you to eat in any amount, a middle tier, which is okay but you have to eat smaller amounts, and a lower tier for foods that you should avoid. These tiers can become even more confusing, at least to me and in my brain, because there doesn't seem to be any sensible pattern for the foods that fit into each tier. But the reason why different foods are chosen is because they have been determined in a lab to contain fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, which is what FODMAP stands for. Thus, a low FODMAP diet is one that avoids foods that include these fermentable components. It's these specific carbohydrate chains that, in people who have gut dysfunction, are more likely to cause us issue, and therefore it can be helpful when we avoid them. Now, if we are going to limit FODMAPs, what foods do we need to watch out for? I often have my patients avoiding grains for one reason or another, but if you are going to include grains in your low FODMAP diet, then rice, corn, and quinoa are all good options, while oats and spelt are okay in low amounts. I also don't have a lot of patients that are including dairy, but if you do tolerate dairy, you need to be aware that lactose is a fermentable disaccharide. So when you're choosing dairy options, you want to choose lactose-free options or things that have most of the lactose processed out of them, such as hard cheeses, butter, or ghee. Nuts tend to be a little bit more limited, but it's generally agreed upon that almonds, walnuts, pecans, and macadamia nuts are okay if you have less than 10 per serving, but you'll want to avoid things like cashews and pistachios. But the trickiest section is going to be our fruits and vegetables. Examples of fruits and vegetables to include are bok choy, bell peppers, carrots, cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, kale, lettuce, olives, spinach, Swiss chard, fresh tomato, zucchini, green banana, blueberries, cantaloupe, honeydew melon, lemons, limes, pineapple, raspberry, rhubarb, and strawberry. Fruits and vegetables that are okay to have in small amounts, and what I typically recommend to my patients is that they have less than 1 cup per meal, include avocado, beets, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, butternut squash, cauliflower, celery, mushrooms, sauerkraut, grapefruit, lychee, and grapes. And finally, The ones that we want to steer clear of, and remember, I'll have all of this posted down below, include artichoke, asparagus, garlic and cabbage, leeks, okra, onions and shallots, snow peas, snap peas, tomato pastes and sauces, apples, apricots, ripe bananas, yellow bananas, blackberries, cherries, and dried fruits, fruit juices, mango, nectarine, and peaches, pears, plums, and watermelon. And if that list makes sense to you and you can see the patterns, you're smarter than I am. But again, I don't think there is an exact pattern, and it all comes down to the laboratory analysis of these foods and their component parts. But even though the list can be confusing, and a lot of people get hung up on the fact that a lot of these foods sound like healthy foods, so why would they be bad for me? The reasoning and research, while not totally complete, is sound. And even if we're not perfect in our application, it can be an effective strategy when used appropriately. But as always, remember that all strategies are not good for all people. And Low FODMAP is just another strategy or tool that you can use if you haven't seen success in other areas. But as we said, it can be confusing, so if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. Also, if you're someone who has used Low FODMAP before and it's been successful for you, then I'd love it if you could share your experience. Or I guess if it hasn't been successful, all feedback is good, and it's always good to learn from you guys. Like I said, time and place, we gotta make sure it fits. Otherwise, if you enjoyed today's information but need some more help and support and are interested in working with me one-on-one, then send me an email at contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com with consult in the subject line. Once we receive your email, my staff will reach out and see if you qualify for the free consultation with me, where we will go over your health history, discuss what your goals are, and see if we're a good fit to work together. After we go over your health, I'll share with you some of my thoughts, explain certain things that you might be missing, and provide you a plan for moving forward and ideally improving your health. At the end of the day, there's no pressure. We want to make these decisions as a team, and whether we move forward or not is up to you. If you'd rather work on some things at home, feel free to check out any of the other videos on the channel or grab either of my free downloads down in the description box. And if you're interested in supplementation, you can follow my link to my FullScript account where you can have access to all of the supplements that I use with my patients on a daily basis and I know have been third-party verified to deliver optimal results. But that's all for now. As always, I want to say thank you so much to those of you who are continuing to support the channel, whether it be in big ways or small. I see you out there and it means a lot to me. If you haven't done so, please consider giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram. But my name is Dr. Brad Bodle. I hope that you guys have a great week, and until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.